Easement or servitude has been defined as a real right constituted on another's property, corporeal and immovable, by virtue of which the owner of the same has to abstain from doing or to allow somebody to do something on his property for the benefit of another thing or person. Easement is an English law term, while servitude, which is derived from Roman law, is the name used in civil law countries. However, they do not exactly have the same meaning. Servitude is the broader term, it may be real or personal, while easement is always real. It is said that easement refers to the right enjoyed by one, and servitude the burden imposed upon another. As for the characteristics of easement, first, it is a real right, but will affect third persons only when duly registered. It is enjoyed over another immovable, never on one's own property. It involves two neighboring estates, the dominant to which a right belongs and the servient upon which an obligation rests. It is inseparable from the estate to which it is attached, and therefore cannot be alienated independently of the estate. It is indivisible, for it is not affected by the division of the estate between two or more persons. It is a right limited by the needs of the dominant owner or estate without possession. It cannot consist in the doing of an act unless the act is accessory in relation to a real easement. And lastly, it is a limitation on the servient owner's rights of ownership for the benefit of the dominant owner, and therefore it is not presumed. Easement gives the holder an incorporeal right on the land but grants no title thereto. Therefore, an acknowledgement of the easement is an admission that the property belongs to another. Easements cannot be imposed on personal property, but only on immovable. Article 614 refers to personal servitude, while Article 613 refers to real servitude. A servitude may be established for the benefit of a particular estate and consequently for its owner. This refers to real servitudes. While if it is for the benefit of a person or group of persons without being the owner or owners of a dominant estate, this refers to personal servitude. The first classification refers to the recipient of benefit. It may be real when the easement is in favor of another immovable. Personal when it is in favor of a community or of one more persons. Thus, it may be public or private. As to its source, it may be voluntary when the easement is established by the will or agreement of the parties or by a testator, legal when it is imposed by law either for public use or in the interest of private persons, and mixed when it is created partly by will or agreement and partly by law. For the third classification, it pertains to its exercise as it may be continuous or discontinuous. For an easement to be continuous, it is not necessary that the use be incessant. It is sufficient that the use may be so. An example for continuous is the right to support a beam on another's wall which really exists continuously. While for discontinuous, an example would be the right of way, which is used at intervals because it is physically impossible that man shall continually pass over the way. The distinction lies in the fact that in continuous easements, the exercise or enjoyment can be had without the intervention of a man, while in discontinuous easements, such exercise or enjoyment requires the intervention of a man. For the fourth classification, it refers to its existence. It may be apparent or non-apparent. For an apparent easement, it is not necessary that its sign be seen. It is sufficient if it may be seen or known on inspection. For non-apparent easement, an example would be a right of way when there is no indication of its existence. The fifth classification refers to the duty of the servient owner. It may be negative or positive. A positive easement is one which imposes upon the owner of the servient estate the obligation of allowing something to be done or of doing it himself. An example of this would be an easement of which the right of way which imposes upon the owner of the servient estate the duty to allow the use of said way. A negative easement is that which prohibits the owner of the servient estate from doing something which he could lawfully do if the easement did not exist. An example of this would be an easement of light and view, whereby the owner of the servient estate is prohibited from obstructing the passage of light. As provided for under Article 617, servitudes are inseparable from the estate to which they actively or passively belong, being accessory things whose very existence depends upon the principal thing. Hence, they are intransmissible in the sense that they cannot be alienated or mortgaged independently of the estate. Under Article 618, easement as a right is indivisible. Accordingly, the partition between two or more persons of either the servient or dominant estate does not affect the existence of the servitude which continues in its entirety. Easements may be legal where it may be established by law, and voluntary where it may be established by the will of the owners. The courts cannot impose or constitute any servitude where none existed. They can only declare its existence if in reality it exists by law or by the will of the owners. Article 620 to 626 deals with the mode of acquiring easements. Only continuous and apparent easements may be acquired either by virtue of a title or by prescription in 10 years. Article 620 fixes 10 years as the period of prescription, regardless of good faith or bad faith of the possessor and whether or not he has just title. Under Article 622, continuous non-apparent easements and discontinuous ones, whether apparent or not, may be acquired by title, not by prescription, because their possession or exercise is either not public, such as easement of lateral and subjacent support, or it is public but not continuous or uninterrupted, like a right-of-way if there is a visible path. Other modes of acquiring easements would be by deed of recognition and by final judgment. Article 623 applies to the easements mentioned in Article 622. It presupposes that there is a title for the easement. The easement may have been acquired by oral contract or by virtue of some documents that has been lost. In either case, easement exists. The owner of the servient estate may voluntarily execute the deed referred to in Article 623, acknowledging the existence of the easement. Another mode would be by apparent sign, established by the owner of two adjoining estates. This contemplates a situation where two estates between which there exists an apparent sign of an easement belong to the same owner. What the law requires is that the sign indicates the existence of a servitude, although there is no true servitude, there being only one owner. All easements carry with them all the rights necessary for their use and exercise. Since these accessory rights or accessory easements exist solely by virtue of and for the use of the servitude which can be considered as the principal one, they cease upon the termination of the servitude. It should be taken note that where the purpose of the easement or the manner of its exercise is defined by the title creating it, the exercise of the easement must be consistent with such purpose or manner.
Section 3 explains the differences between the dominant owner versus the servient owner. Let us first distinguish between the two. A dominant estate is one that has an easement over another piece of property, while the servient estate is the parcel of land that is subject to an easement. To better grasp how this works, let's take this illustration as an example. Property B is landlocked, so the owner cannot access the property without entering property A. Property B therefore has an easement on property A. Property B has an easement on property A, hence it is the dominant estate. It then follows that property A is the servient estate. Article 627 provides that the owner of the dominant estate may make, at his own expense, on the servient estate any works necessary for the use and preservation of the servitude, but without altering it or rendering it more burdensome. For this purpose, he shall notify the owner of the servient estate and shall choose the most convenient time and manner so as to cause the least inconvenience to the owner of the servient estate. Now, what if there are several dominant estates? Article 628 contemplates this. It states that should there be several dominant estates, the owners of all of them shall be obliged to contribute to the expenses referred to in the preceding article, in proportion to the benefits which each may derive from the work. Now, anyone who does not wish to contribute may exempt himself by renouncing the easement for the benefit of the others. Now, if the owner of the servient estate should make use of the easement in any manner whatsoever, he shall also be obliged to contribute to the expenses in the proportion stated, saving an agreement to the contrary. What are the obligations of a dominant owner? First, he cannot alter the easement or render it more burdensome. He cannot use the easement except for the benefit of the immovable originally contemplated. He cannot exercise the easement in any other manner than that previously established. He may make any works or construct anything which is necessary for the use and preservation of the servitude. He shall notify the servant owner of works necessary for the use and preservation of the servitude. He must choose the most convenient time and manner in making the necessary works as to cause the least inconvenience to the servant owner, and he must contribute to the necessary expenses if there are several dominant estates. Of course, the servant owner also has obligations. He cannot impair the use of the easement, and he must contribute to the necessary expenses in case he uses the easement, unless there is an agreement to the contrary. In case of impairment, to restore conditions to the status quo at his expense, plus damages, and to pay for the expenses incurred after the change of location. Article 631 provides for the ways in which easements are extinguished. The first is by merger in the same person of the ownership of the dominant and servant estates. The second is by non-use for 10 years. With respect to discontinuous easements, this period shall be computed from the day on which they cease to be used, and with respect to continuous easements from day on which an act contrary to the same took place. Third is when either or both of the estates fall into such condition that the easement cannot be used, but it shall revive if the subsequent condition of the estates or either of them should again permit its use, unless when the use becomes possible, sufficient time for prescription has elapsed in accordance with the provisions of the preceding number. Fourth, by the expiration of the term or the fulfillment of the condition, if the easement is temporary or conditional. Fifth, by the renunciation of the owner of the dominant estate. And sixth, by the redemption agreed upon between the owners of the dominant and servant estates.
Hey Natalia, what's up?
Hi Carol, not much. Have you heard from Loki? I think he bought a house in Asgard and he seems to be having problems with it.
Yes, I actually told him to buy the lot along Town Harry, but he said he did not like the developer. Anyway, he also told me he was leasing a property from Thor, wherein he was allowed by Thor to use 62 trees from the land from where he gathered fruits. He was also allowed to construct his house on the land because it would facilitate his gathering of fruits. So I told him that this would be in the nature of personal easement under Article 614 of the Civil Code as mentioned in the case of Alcantara versus Reta.
He also called the other day. He was worried because a portion of his estate had already been converted into an alley for neighboring estates. So he wanted to ask if he can just put up a gate to close it down. I told him he can't. In Solid Manila versus Biohong, it has been held that although the owner did acquire ownership over the property, including the alley, he still did not acquire the right to close that alley or otherwise put up obstructions to prevent the usage of it. As a servitude, the alley is supposed to be open to the public.
By the way, just an additional information about easements, specifically regarding its extinguishment. I was told that in the case of Tañedo versus Bernad, the alienation of the dominant and servant estate to different persons, it is not one of the grounds for the extinguishment of an easement. The use of easement is continued by operation of law as provided for under Article 624. Just thought you should also know since you could share this information to Loki. Anyways, thanks for the talk, Natalia. I really have to go now and meet with Nick Fury. See you!
Alright, see you later.
Hi, Captain America. Kamusta?
Hello. Ito ayos naman. Pupunta kami sa Shield.
Kamusta si Boss Nick Fury?
Okay na okay.
Pero eto nga, may bebenta ako sa'yo. May maganda akong offer.
Saang property naman yan? Baka budol yan ha?
Uy, hindi ah. May bebenta ako sa'yo na property malapit sa Stark Tower. O di ba magkapit-bahay kayo ni Mr. Stark?
Naku, sayang. Meron ng offer sa akin si Wong. Malapit sa Sanctum Sanctorum. Yung kabilang lote. O, at least malapit kala Doctor Strange. So, pwede ako sumama sa trading nila.
Nako, wag dun. Alam ko, yung property na yon, yan yung case of Villanueva versus Velasco. Ang chismis dyan ng mga Marites ay bumili ng property si Villanueva sa Pacific Banking Corporation. Ang dating may-ari ng lupa ay si Maximo and Justina Gabriel. Yung mag-asawa na Gabriel ay nagpatayo ng very small house na nakaharang sa right-of-way ni Espinolas. Now, nag-issue ang RTC ng writ of demolition at kailangan tanggalin ang bahay na nakaharang sa easement or yung right-of-way. Pero ang sabi ni Villanueva ay writ of demolition should not prosper since the easement, which is meant to protect, was not annotated sa title. Then alam mo ba, sabi ng Supreme Court, the easement on the property binds the petitioner. The existence of the easement has been established by the lower courts and the same has become conclusive to the SC. The small house occupying 1 meter of the 2 meter wide easement obstructs to the entry of private respondent cement mixer and motor vehicle, no mention of what kind. Accordingly, the petitioner has to demolish the house to make way for the easement.
Grabe naman na chismis yan. Sige, ayoko na bilhin yun. Pero may inoffer rin sa akin na property si Aunt May, yung tita ni Peter Parker. So, check ko yun kung okay.
Wait, alam ko din yun. Yan yung nasa case of National Irrigation Administration versus Court of Appeals. Sabi naman nila dyan, ay pumasok ang NIA sa property ni Mang Lapus. Ang sabi ni Mang Lapus ay kailangan may just compensation, pero ang sabi ng Supreme Court by the end ay hindi kailangan magbayad ng NIA ng just compensation dahil under the original certificate of title, there was a reservation and condition that the land is subject to all conditions and public easements and servitudes recognized and prescribed under the law, especially those mentioned in sections 109 to 114 of the Commonwealth Act as amended.
Ang dami mo naman alam na chismis. O sige na nga. Let me consider your property. Oh, Captain America! Idol! Kamusta?
Oh, okay naman pare. Shot tayo pare. Shot pare. Shot. Ito, alcohol pare. Alcohol. Shot tayo.
Sige, Cap. Pass muna ako. Hindi pa ako makain eh. Pero hingi sana ako ng tulong sa'yo. Kasi, sabi sa akin ni Wanda, magaling ka raw sa property law. So, natatanong sana ako sa'yo about legal easement.
Madali lang yan. Okay, pag sinabing legal easement, okay, these are easement imposed by law which have for their object either public or for the interest of a private person. So, there are two kinds of legal easement. Okay, public legal easement, those public or communal use and governed primarily based by special law and by the civil code, and private legal easement, those for the interest of a private person or private use.
Okay. Pero ano yung tinatawag na water easement?
Sige, let's start with easement of drainage of water. Pag sinabing easement of drainage of water, the lower estates are obliged to receive the following. Number 1, the waters which naturally and without the intervention of a man descend from the higher estates and the stones or earth carried by the waters. Pag sinabi namang easement on riparian property, okay, it's the bank of rivers and stream, even in case they are a private ownership, are subject throughout their entire length and within the zone of 3 meters for urban areas, 20 meters for agricultural areas, and 40 meters for forest areas along their margins to the easement of public use in the general interest of navigation, floatage, fishing, recreation, and salvage.
Oh, nice. Pero di ba parang may term rin na abutment of a dam?
Oh, kapag sinabing abutment of a dam, whenever for the diversion of taking of water from the river or brook, or for the use of any continuous or discontinuous stream, it should be necessary to build a dam. A person may establish the easement of abutment of a dam provided that the purpose is to divert or take water from the river or brook or to use any or other continuous or discontinuous stream. Payment for the proper indemnity is made. It is necessary to build a dam. The person to construct it is not the owner of the banks or lot which must support it, and he must seek the permission of the owner. Compulsory easements for drawing water or watering animals can be imposed only for a reason of public use in favor of a town or village after payment of the proper indemnity.
O baka naman itanong mo ano yung aqueduct. O any person who may wish to use upon his own estate any water of which he can dispose shall have the right to make it flow through the intervening estates with the obligation to indemnify their owners as well as the owners of the lower estates upon which the waters may filter or descend. Oh, baka naman itanong mo ano yung stop lock or sluice gate. Oh, it is the construction of a stop lock or sluice gate in the bed of the stream for which the water is to be taken for the purpose of irrigating or improving on estate.
Galing naman talaga ng idol ko. Ito, last na Kap. Ano yung right of way?
Dami mo naman talagang tanong. Nagiinom ako eh. Oh, sige, last na yun ha. Right of way. Oh, who may demand of right of way? The owner of a dominant estate and any person with the real right to cultivate or use the dominant estate. So, what is the requisites for legal demand to establish the easement of right of way? So, number one, the dominant estate is surrounded by other immovables owned by other persons. There must be no access, means of entrance and exit. So, di ka makapasok, di ka rin makalabas. And if there is an access, it is difficult or dangerous to use or grossly insufficient. So, yan, that's a right of way.
Sige Kap, maraming salamat. Tatandaan ko yung mga sinabi mo. Para makabawi ako sa'yo, lilibre kitang pulutan. Pero tanong ko, hanggang anong oras ka mo magiinom dyan?
I can do this all day.
The controversy in this case is regarding the right-of-way in Manyan Road. On January 1976, Ateneo and La Vista acknowledged the voluntary easement or mutual right-of-way wherein the parties would allow the other to use their half portion of the Manyan Road, La Vista to use ADMU's 7.5 meters of the Manyan Road, and also the other way around. Now, ADMU auctioned off the property wherein Solid Homes Incorporated, the developer of Loyola Grand Villas, was the highest bidder. ADMU transferred not only the property but also the right to negotiate the easement on the road. However, La Vista did not want to recognize the easement, thus they blocked the road. I did not recognize such easement, hence I blocked the road and put some guards over the entrance of the Loyola Grand Villas. Loyola residents had adequate outlet to a public highway using the roads, and also that the other party has not finalized the negotiation of the easement.
In the case at bar, all the predecessors in interest of both parties recognized the existence of such easement, and there was no agreement yet to revoke the same. The free ingress and egress along Mangian Road created by the voluntary agreement is thus demandable. The parties concerned had indeed constituted a voluntary easement of right-of-way over Mangian Road, and, like any other contract, the same could be extinguished only by mutual agreement or by renunciation of the owner of the dominant estate.
The next topic may be found under Article 658 to 666. Now, easement of party wall. This refers to all those mass of rights and obligations emanating from the existence and common enjoyment of wall, fence, enclosure, or hedges by the owners of adjacent buildings and estates separated by such subjects. A common wall which separates two estates built by a common agreement at the dividing line such that it occupies a portion of both estates on equal parts. Note that although called a legal easement, it is a compulsory kind of co-ownership or forged in division where the shares of each owner cannot be separated physically without destroying the wall. Thus, each owner owns the half interest to him. In the table, you will see the differences between a party wall and co-ownership. Among others will be as to their physical division of shares. For example, for a party wall, shares of parties cannot be physically segregated, but they can be physically identified. Meanwhile, for co-ownership, shares of the co-owners can be divided and separated physically, but before such division, a co-owner cannot point to any definite portion of the property as belonging to him. It is important to note that not all common walls are party walls. Thus, a wall built on a lot owned or co-owned by two persons is a common wall but not a party wall. Now, there are presumptions of existence. It means that the existence of an easement of party wall is presumed unless there is a title or exterior sign or proof to the contrary. For example, in dividing walls of adjoining buildings up to point of common elevation. Second, in dividing walls of gardens and yards situated in cities, towns, or in rural communities. Third, in fences, walls, and live hedges dividing rural lands. Next, in ditches and drains opened between two estates. Note that if the earth or dirt removed to open the ditch or to clean it is only on one side, the ownership of the ditch belongs exclusively to the owner of the land having this exterior sign in its favor. As mentioned, the existence of an easement of a party wall may also be rebutted. First, by title, by proof to the contrary, or by exterior signs to the contrary. As for the exterior signs rebutting the existence of a party wall, they are enumerated and you may see all of them in the screen. Note that if one owner has signs in his favor and some against him, they generally cancel each other unless it can be shown from the purpose of the wall that it had been made for the exclusive benefit of one. The rights of part owners include the following: to make use of the wall in proportion to their respective interests, rest buildings on it, or insert beams up to one half of the wall's thickness. To increase the height of the wall, he must do so at his expense, pay for any damage which may be caused by the work even though such damage may be temporary, bear the costs of maintenance of the portion added, pay for the increased cost of preservation, reconstruct if original wall cannot bear the increased height, and give additional space necessary if the wall is to be thickened. Next, that owner may also demolish the building being supported by a party wall provided that the cost of all repairs and work necessary to prevent any damage which the demolition may cause to the party wall shall be borne by him. Note that he may also renounce his part ownership of the wall. Now, as to the obligations of each part owner, he or she may contribute proportionately to the repair and maintenance unless he renounces his part ownership. If one part owner raises the height of the wall, he or she must bear the cost of the maintenance of the additions, bear the increased expenses of preservation, bear the cost of construction, and give additional land if necessary to thicken the wall. That means that the owners who have not contributed in giving the height, depth, or thickness to the wall may nevertheless acquire the right of part ownership therein by paying proportionately the value of the work at the time of the acquisition and of the land used. The easement of light and view is provided under Article 667 to 673 of the Civil Code. Easement of light, or jus luminum, is the right to admit light from the neighboring estate by virtue of the opening of a window or the making of certain openings. Meanwhile, easement of view necessarily includes easement of light. It pertains to the right to make openings or windows to enjoy the view through the estate of another and the power to which would obstruct such view or make the same difficult. No part owner without the consent of others open through the party wall any window or aperture of any kind as provided under Article 667. As to the effect, if the opening is done without consent, the other co-owners may demand what has been done be undone solely at the part owner's expense. As to the 10-year period of prescription for acquisition of easement of light and view, Article 668 provides that the period of prescription for the acquisition of an easement of light and view shall be counted, first, when the easement is positive or if made through a party wall, from the time of the opening of the window, or where the easement is negative or if made through a wall on the dominant estate, from the time of the formal prohibition upon the adjoining owner. Rules for regular windows. For windows having direct views or face-to-face, observe at least 2 meters distance between the wall having the windows and the boundary line. For windows having side or oblique views, meaning that from direct view, one must turn his head to the right or to the left to view the adjoining land, observe a distance of at least 60 centimeters between the boundary line and the nearest edge of the window. The non-observance of these distances does not give rise to presumption as provided under Article 670, paragraph 3. Where the above distances or mentioned distances are not applicable. First, to buildings separated by a public way or alley, which is not less than 3 meters wide under Article 672, unless a special regulation and local ordinance provide the contrary. Next, whenever by any title such as contract, will, donation, or prescription, a right has been acquired to have a direct view or direct views, balconies, or overlooking an adjoining property, the servant's estate cannot build thereon if the direct view is less than a distance of 3 meters from the wall. This is found under Article 673. For the purposes of the discussion, balcony is a platform that projects from the wall of a building and is enclosed by a parapet or railing. Meanwhile, a belvedere is a structure or a summer house designed to command a view. Article 673 speaks of a true servitude of restraint or abstention. Unlike Articles 669 and 670, which do not really prefer or refer to easements since both owners are prohibited. Lastly, restricted windows, when the above distances are not observed. When the foregoing distances are not observed, only restricted windows may be made by the owner of a wall which is not a party wall, subject to the following requirements. First, there must be a wire screen. Second, there must be an iron grating embedded in the wall. Third, maximum size is 30 centimeters square. Fourth, the opening must be at the height of the ceiling joist, beams, or immediately under the ceiling, techo. And the window must be for the purpose of admitting light and air only, but not of view. These are the remedies of abutting owner in case of restricted windows. First, close the opening if the wall becomes a party wall. Second, block the light by building or erecting his own wall unless a servitude is acquired by title or prescription. He may also ask for the reduction of the opening to the proper size. Drainage and buildings. This topic may be found under Article 674 to 676. The owner of a building shall be obliged to construct its roof or covering in such manner that the rainwater shall fall on his own land or on a street or public place, and not on the land of his neighbor. This is provided under Article 674. The owner of a tenement or a piece of land subject to the easement of receiving water falling from roofs may build in such manner as to receive the water upon his own roof or give it another outlet in accordance with local ordinances or customs, and in such a way as not to cause any damage whatever to the dominant estate. Whenever the yard or court of a house is surrounded by other houses and it is not possible to give an outlet through the house itself to the rainwater collected thereon, the establishment of an easement of drainage can be demanded. Easement of drainage of buildings. The right to divert or empty the rainwaters from one's own roof or shed to the neighbor's estate either drop by drop or by conduits. Article 674 does not really create an easement, for it merely regulates the use of a person's property insofar as rainwater is concerned. It provides an exception to Article 637, which requires lower estates to receive water naturally flowing from higher estates. Easement to receive falling rainwaters. It deals not with a legal easement but with a voluntary easement to receive rainwater falling from the roof of an adjoining building. Easement giving outlet to rainwater where house surrounded by other houses. This is actually similar to legal easements of right of way. The requirements are the following: least possible damage caused, there must be payment of proper indemnity, there must be no adequate outlet to the rainwater because the yard or court of a house is surrounded by other houses, as provided under Article 676. The outlet to the water must be at the point where egress is easiest and establishing a conduit for drainage, also found under Article 676. Rainwaters falling on private lands shall belong to the state. However, any person who collects water by means of cisterns, tanks, or pools shall have exclusive control over the same and shall have the right to dispose it only for domestic purposes. This is found under the Water Code Article 6 to 7.
For intermediate distances and works for certain constructions and plantings, the Civil Code prohibits several constructions and plantings based on certain distances of some properties. Under Article 677 of the Civil Code, those constructions or plantings near fortified places or fortresses are prohibited, and in order to be valid, there must be compliance with the conditions required in special laws, ordinances, and regulations related to. As provided under Article 678, any construction whereby its nature or products are dangerous or noxious is prohibited without proper compliance with distance rules prescribed by the regulations and customs of the place, and without making necessary protective works subject in regard to the manner thereof to the conditions prescribed by such regulations. In the absence of regulations, such precautions shall be taken as may be considered necessary in order to avoid any damage to the neighboring lands or tenements. Next are the trees planted near a tenement or piece of land belonging to another. To further discuss this, I will show you a video.
Hi, you must be the owner of this place. Hello, my name is Peter Parker.
What's the matter? I am Doctor Strange.
So you are using your made-up names. Then I am Spider-Man. There seems to be a problem regarding this parcel of land belonging to you, I believe.
What is it?
One of your neighbors planted trees very near to your boundaries.
I was too busy fixing the multiverse and never noticed that. Let me see it. Excuse me, boy, I'm confused. The tree was not even planted within my property, so what should be my concern here?
Actually, they're not allowed to plant near your area according to the law. I learned that from Edme when she fought with one of our neighbors. I just don't know the exact measurements. I guess it's better to ask a lawyer.
Okay, Spider-Boy.
It's Spider-Man. Oh gosh, you're the best sorcerer, but you can't recall simple names.
Okay, Spider's human.
Dang it!
Hello again, Peter. What is your concern?
Actually, it's his concern. You know him. I'm just the concerned neighbor. Spider-Man.
My neighbor planted a tree near the boundaries of my land, but we don't know if the tree is within the distance prohibited by the law.
Okay. According to Article 679 of the Civil Code, no trees shall be planted near a tenement or piece of land belonging to another except at the distance authorized by the ordinances or customs of the place. Here, we must first ascertain if there is an ordinance providing such distance rule or if there is a distance according to customs. If none, the law states that it should be planted at a distance of at least 2 meters from the dividing line of the estates if tall trees are planted and at a distance of at least 50 centimeters if shrubs or small trees are planted. Since a tall tree was planted and there are no ordinances or customs providing for the distance, it was planted not less than 2 meters from the dividing line of the estate.
What would be my remedy?
You may demand that they be cut off in so far as they may spread over your property. Also, if the tree's roots penetrate your land, you may cut it yourself.
Hello, neighbor. It looks like you violated the distance rule regarding the planting of this tree over here.
What is your basis?
Article 679 of the Civil Code, and accordingly, I have the right to demand to cut this off.
What if I decline?
Then let's do the hard way.
Again, as what the lawyer in the video discussed, planting of trees near the dividing line of the estates are prohibited if not in compliance with the ordinances providing distance rules or the customs of the place. In the absence thereof, tall trees must not be planted less than 2 meters near the dividing lines of the estates, and with regard to small trees and shrubs, it should not be planted less than 50 centimeters. The remedy of the owner of neighboring estate in this case is to demand the cutting of the tree insofar as they may spread over his property, or when the roots are already penetrating his land, he may cut it himself. As provided under Article 681, a fruit falling naturally upon adjacent land belonging to another is owned by the owner of that adjacent land.
Article 682. Every building or piece of land is subject to the easement which prohibits the proprietor or possessor from committing nuisance through noise, jarring, offensive odor, smoke, heat, dust, water, glare, and other causes. So the reason for this is because, among others, it annoys or offends the senses and it should be therefore prohibited. So the servant in an easement against nuisance is the proprietor or the possessor of the building or piece of land who commits the nuisance through noise, jarring, offensive odor, and the dominant in an easement against nuisance is the general public or anyone injured by the nuisance. Article 683. Subject to zoning, health, police and other laws and regulations, factories and shops may be maintained provided the least possible annoyance is caused to the neighborhood. The code considers this easement against nuisance as negative because the proprietor or possessor is prohibited to do something which he could lawfully do were it not for the existence of the easement. However, a nuisance involves any act of omission which is unlawful. So these two articles are more of a restriction on the right of ownership than a true easement. Article 684. No proprietor shall make such excavations upon his land as to deprive any adjacent land or building of sufficient lateral or subjacent support. So an example of lateral support would be, while a person may excavate on his own land, he cannot do so if by such action adjacent buildings would collapse or adjacent lands crumble. An example of subjacent support would be A owning a parcel of land with a house, but underneath the soil is being used by B in connection with a tunnel. And lastly, we have the three articles, Article 685, 686, and 687. So 685 provides that any stipulation or testamentary provision allowing excavation that cause danger to an adjacent land or building shall be void. For Article 686, it provides that the legal easement of lateral and subjacent support is not only for buildings standing at the time the excavations are made, but also for constructions that may be erected. And for Article 687, any proprietor intending to make any excavation contemplated in the three preceding articles shall notify all owners of adjacent lands.
Good evening, Marvel Universe. Before I make good on my promise to bring about world destruction, let me deliver to you today's news. The right to cross or otherwise use someone else's property is referred to as easement. Previous discussions have already explained that easements may be made by law or the will of the owner. Article 688 to 693 provide the laws related to voluntary easement. Every owner of a tenement or piece of land may establish thereon the easements which he may deem suitable in the manner and form for which he may deem best, provided he does not contravene the laws, public policy, and public order. When Loki decided he wanted to put up a building in Asgard, he realized that the entryway to his building would be blocked by surrounding properties. He asked for my help to destroy these properties, but I told him there might be another way. Therefore, we talked to his neighbors. An agreement was made between the parties to create an easement. Contrasted against legal easements, voluntary easements are deemed more amicable and less costly. Had I continued with the suggestion of destroying the property, Loki would be liable for the destruction and the restoration of the things to their condition before the impairment was committed. While this was ongoing, Iron Man and Pepper Potts chimed in to enumerate the rules governing voluntary easements. These are the following. If created by title, the title governs, and the CC is suppletory. If created by prescription, the form and manner it is acquired governs. If created by prescription in a proper case, the way the easement has been possessed, that is the manner and form of possession. Captain America, still fighting for American ideals and usufructuary, conducted a meeting this afternoon and laid down the rules in the event that there is a usufruct. When there is a usufruct, the owner of a tenement or piece of land may impose thereon, without the consent of the usufructuary, any servitudes which will not injure the right of usufruct. Second, when a usufruct exists, the beneficial owner may by himself create a temporary easement compatible with the extent of his beneficial domain. Different rules will apply for those under a co-ownership, as in the case of Jean Grey and Wolverine. In order to impose an easement on an undivided tenement or piece of land, the consent of all the co-owners shall be required. Once a co-owner gives the consent, it cannot be revoked. Voluntary easements are established in favor of predial servitudes and personal servitudes. If the owner of the servient estate has bound himself to bear the cost of the work required for the use and preservation thereof, he may free himself from this obligation by renouncing his property to the owner of the dominant estate. Continuing, we move on to the extinguishment of voluntary easements. This can only be done by mutual agreement. A voluntary easement could be extinguished only by mutual agreement or by renunciation of the owner of the dominant estate. The opening of an adequate outlet to a highway can extinguish only legal or compulsory easements, not voluntary easements. The fact that an easement by grant may have also qualified as an easement by necessity does not detract from its permanency as a property right which survives the termination of the necessity. Finally, the knowledge we have acquired can be found in the doctrine of the cases of Floro versus Lendo and Alolino versus Flores. For the first doctrine is that to be entitled to a compulsory servitude of right-of-way under the Civil Code, the preconditions provided under Article 649 and 650 thereof must be established. These preconditions are, first, that the dominant estate is surrounded by other immovables and has no adequate outlet to a public highway. Second, after payment of proper indemnity. Third, that the isolation was not due to acts of the proprietor of the dominant estate. And fourth, that the right-of-way claimed is at the point least prejudicial to the servient estate, and insofar as inconsistent with this rule, where the distance from the dominant estate to a public highway may be the shortest, the burden of providing the existence of the prerequisites to validly claim a compulsory right-of-way lies on the owner of the dominant estate. Also, the second doctrine is that an easement of light and view can be acquired through prescription, counting from the time when the owner of the dominant estate formally prohibits the adjoining lot owner from blocking the view of a window located within the dominant estate. That is it for this evening's news. Thank you and good night.